Welcome back. This is Family Time 192. We're revisiting self awareness, and we're talking about emotional intelligence, really talking about identifying our emotions. And that's the first step toward emotional intelligence. Really, all this stuff that we do for family time is all about training, practicing emotional intelligence, and it is something that we need to practice. We've talked about this before, but there are so many different types of intelligences. Unfortunately, in an academic setting, we often reward one type of intelligence, or we give the most weight to one type of intelligence, which is that kind of academic intelligence. How good are you, or how well do you do school? Remember the things you need to remember, be able to present them in the ways that are asked to be presented. But there's so many different types of intelligences. And emotional intelligence is really the most significant because we are emotional creatures. We are impacted by our emotions in everything that we do. And if you have the ability to identify your emotions and manage them in a healthy way, it gives you a leg up in anything that you're going to do. It gives you, it correlates to success in every endeavor. And that's why it's so important to address. We are emotional creatures, and I often like the analogy of the elephant and the rider, right? And in this analogy, the elephant is your emotions, your emotional state. And the rider, the person sitting on top of the elephant, that's our cognitive thought, right? Our rational thinking. If the rider is in control, if the rider has taken the time to train the elephant, then it can use that elephant to accomplish very powerful things, things that it could not accomplish without the elephant. Because the elephant is this big, powerful creature. But if the elephant's in control, if the elephant hasn't been trained, the elephant will go wherever it wants, and there is absolutely nothing the rider can do about it. I like that analogy because that's how our emotions work. If we can be clear about our emotions and manage our emotions and train our emotions, and it takes practice, then we can utilize our emotions to become even more successful, to take ourselves to the next level in whatever we're doing. But if our emotions are controlling us, if we're just subject to our emotions at all times, then they're too powerful. They're going to take us wherever they want to go. So it's important for us to understand our emotions. And I want you to start by just identifying some stressors or situations that make you feel a particular emotion. When I talk about stressors, and we'll talk more about like stress management and stuff later, but the idea of stress is, it exists on that bell curve. And again, I'll talk in more detail about this later, but we need some stress. We need some challenge. That's how, stress is really just something that elicits a response. We think of stress in a negative connotation, but it's not necessarily a negative thing. We all need stress. So I want you to think of just the things that elicit from you an emotional reaction. And I want you to think how your emotional state impacts your behavior. There's very simple to understand. It's kind of built into most creatures is the idea of like the fight, flight, or freeze response. That if you're in this highly stressful situation, highly emotional situation, that some people will fight, they push back. Some people will flight, they'll flee, they'll try to get away from it, and some will just freeze up. Now it's a survival instinct to fight, flight, or freeze, but that happens in our regular emotional interactions all the time. Sometimes we feel the need to lash out to fight when we're feeling stressed emotionally. Other times, we try to avoid our emotions. And other times, we just freeze up and don't have any idea what to do. So it's important to realize the things that first elicit from us an emotional reaction. Then we can work to manage those things in a more productive way. The last thing I want you to think about is, so we're talking about what elicits from you an emotional reaction. How does that emotional state impact your behavior? And I also want you to think about how it impacts your ability to learn, because that's what we're doing here. And really, anything in your life, you want to be able to learn and grow. That's an important part of life. And too often, our emotions are the things that keep us from progress. So consider those things this week. We're not trying to solve all the problems in the world right now with our emotional states, and it's okay. Sometimes we think of emotional intelligence as being sort of overly stoic and cold and callous, and I don't think that's the case at all. It's about recognizing our emotions and then being able to quickly return to a baseline, to process our emotions more quickly so that we can be more effective, and then we can even utilize our emotional state. Until next time, much love.